Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. A suspect has been identified in the Indianapolis mass shooting. Officials have not revealed why the gunman opened fire in a FedEx facility. Now an investigation is underway, including a search of the suspect's home. President Biden and Japan's Prime Minister met at the White House today. They're working together to counter mounting threats from the Chinese Communist regime and North Korea. Human smugglers are advertising their services out in the open on Facebook. A new report claims the tech giant helps smugglers through its algorithms. Michigan hits a record high CCP virus case average. It's 1,000 more cases than their winter peak. A new candidate in Georgia's gubernatorial race next year. Democrat turned Republican Vernon Jones is set to challenge Governor Brian Kemp in the state's Republican primary. Police have identified the shooter who killed 8 people at a FedEx facility in Indianapolis last night. Police haven't revealed the motive for this mass shooting yet, but they say the gunman had been a FedEx employee at some point. NTD's Kevin Hogan has the story.
Law enforcement has identified 19-year-old Brandon Scott Hull of Indianapolis as the shooter who killed 8 people in a FedEx facility late Thursday in Indianapolis. Hull was last employed by FedEx in 2020. Craig McCart is the deputy chief of the Indianapolis Police Department. He said the suspect came to the facility, exited his car, and quickly started shooting randomly outside the facility. The gunman then entered the building and apparently killed himself just minutes after the shooting spree started.
When officers arrived, they found a very chaotic and active crime scene. They found several victims injured and several victims deceased, as well as the suspect who was deceased as well of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound.
The police received reports of shots fired at the facility around 11 p.m. An employee told Wish TV he saw a man with a submachine gun or some sort of automatic rifle, and he was firing in the open. The special agent in charge of the FBI field office in Indianapolis, Paul Keenan, said the FBI is helping law enforcement.
FBI personnel are assisting the crime scene, conducting interviews, assisting on the search of the suspect's home, and will provide any technical expertise requested by the IMPD. Many of you have already asked what the motive of this shooting was, and with less than 12 hours since the shooting, it would be premature to speculate on that motivation.
The investigation includes a search of a home associated with Hull. In the search, investigators seized evidence including computers and other electronic media. That's according to what officials told the Associated Press on condition of anonymity. A woman shows a picture of her husband near the FedEx facility where he worked. The woman said she's waiting to learn if her husband is still alive. No police officers were injured in the shooting that took place near the city's airport, and Keenan says there is no further threat. The flags at the White House are flying at half-staff as a mark of respect for the victims. They will remain at half-staff until Tuesday. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Some moderate Republicans and Democrats want to slash Biden's proposed infrastructure plan by more than half, proposing an $800 billion bill instead of his $2 trillion plan. West Virginia Senator Shelley Moore Capito is leading the push for a lower price tag on infrastructure. Republican Susan Collins is on board with it, and moderate Democrat Senator Chris Coons hinted he supports her starting point too. But Coons says the Senate should first focus on drafting one bill that is bipartisan. Then whatever's left out of that bill that Republicans don't agree on can be pushed through in a second $1 trillion bill via budget reconciliation. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has also suggested splitting the infrastructure bill in two. And former Georgia lawmaker Vernon Jones will challenge Governor Brian Kemp in the state's Republican primary next year. Jones is promising to replace the current voting system in Georgia. NTD's Allison Lee has the details.
Former Georgia State Representative and Democrat-turned-Republican Vernon Jones is announcing his bid for Georgia governor in 2022. During his press conference on Friday morning, Jones says he is challenging current Governor Brian Kemp in the Republican primary. The time has come. Georgia is ready, he says.
I am pro-Second Amendment. I am pro-life. And I will work with anyone who's willing to put Georgia first.
Jones says his top priority is to replace Georgia's current Dominion voting system, and he is also promising to achieve school choice and reform the education system. He is campaigning on a pro-Trump and Georgia First agenda. He tweeted earlier this week that Brian Kemp still hasn't discontinued the use of Dominion voting machines in the state of Georgia. I'll do it on day one. He criticizes what he calls Governor Kemp's failed leadership during the 2020 elections, cancel culture, and socialist policies.
We rather change this country for the better than to fall to the fake outrage, the Twitter mob, and the cancel culture of the left. We are building an army.
Jones used to be a lifelong Democrat. He made national headlines a year ago for endorsing Trump's re-election as a Democrat lawmaker. He switched to the Republican Party in January this year. Jones campaigned actively to support Trump and Georgia's 2 Republican senators during the 2020 elections. Trump had called on Governor Kemp to resign and promised to campaign against him. Allison Lee, NTD News.
The defense finished presenting their case in former police officer Derek Chauvin's trial. Next, both sides will present their closing statements before the jury goes off to debate. NTD's Christina Kim summarizes what the defense has said so far.
The defense rests their case without former police officer Derek Chauvin testifying in his own trial.
I will invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege today.
Do you feel that your decision not to testify is a voluntary one on your behalf?
Yes, it is.
Minnesota's prosecution must prove that Chauvin is guilty beyond reasonable doubt, a high bar. They tried to show that George Floyd died from a lack of oxygen and that Chauvin's use of force was excessive. The defense called in a different expert on the use of force, who said Chauvin's actions were justified.
I felt that Officer Chauvin's interactions with Mr. Floyd were following his training, following current practices in policing, and were objectively reasonable.
Maryland's former chief medical examiner Dr. David Fowler testified that Floyd died because his heart disease caused a sudden cardiac arrhythmia, or irregular heart beating. Fowler said the fentanyl and methamphetamine in his system also contributed.
How did the heart and drugs contribute to the cause of death?
They were significant.
Fowler said the manner of death should be undetermined instead of a homicide because there were so many competing factors. He also suggested carbon monoxide from the squad car's exhaust may have contributed to Floyd's death, but Fowler says he never saw test results to support this theory. Prosecution then told the judge they just found lab results that morning they wanted to use. The defense said prosecution never shared that information, despite knowing about their planned testimony since February. Judge Cahill ultimately did not allow those lab results to be admitted into this trial. It was too late.
But if he even hints that there are test results that the jury has not heard about, it's going to be a mistrial. Pure and simple. This late disclosure is not the way we should be operating here.
The prosecution called back Dr. Tobin to try to refute the idea that carbon monoxide played a role in Floyd's death. Tobin testified earlier that Floyd died from a low level of oxygen.
And we know in Mr. Floyd that it was 98% saturated.
So 98% saturated with oxygen?
With oxygen when they measured it in Hennepin County. And that was 9/16, the time frame.
Tobin says because his blood was saturated with 98% oxygen, the amount of carbon monoxide would be at most 2%, a normal level. Closing arguments are set to happen on Monday, and then the jury will go off to deliberate. Christina Kim, NTD News.
The third virus wave is setting record-breaking numbers in Michigan. The governor's facing pressure to lock the state down, but hasn't budged. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
Michigan's surge hasn't let up since mid-February. Early data from Johns Hopkins University says it's the worst wave they've seen yet. Their daily case average on Thursday, some 9,300, 1,000 more than their winter peak. Governor Gretchen Whitmer's blamed the surge on variants and people who disobey the state's pandemic restrictions. Whitmer told ABC News that's why she's putting heavier lockdown measures on the back burner.
I do have some powers. My Department of Health and Human Services does retain some powers to do some things, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to whether or not the citizens take this seriously and do their part. And that's really going to be the answer to getting us out of this moment.
But the governor has yet to show evidence backing up her claim that non-compliant Michiganders are having a significant impact on this surge. Her office hasn't gotten back to us. The U.S. may be dealing with a surge, but it's far smaller than India's. They're reporting numbers double what they saw in their last wave. Over 200,000 new cases each day in the last 2 days. The 1.3 billion strong countries reporting a daily death average of about 1,100 a day. According to The Diplomat, 2 of India's largest cities have placed stringent lockdown measures. Now, over 80 million people in the U.S. are fully vaccinated, and about 5,800 of them have tested positive for the virus. The CDC director gave this data to Congress on Thursday.
5,300 breakthrough infections that we are 5,800, that we are aware of, 396 of whom were hospitalized, and there have been 74 deaths. So we are keeping a close eye on this.
So far, the CDC is only recommending Pfizer and Moderna vaccines since they've called a pause on Johnson & Johnson's. And it looks like the pause will be in place at least until next Friday, the 23rd, when health officials meet to review the vaccine publicly. Okay, Steph, back to you.
Thanks, Miguel. And Customs and Border Protection officers have seized $350,000 worth of counterfeit face masks from China. They intercepted the shipment at the Houston airport. Seaport. Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, officers found the counterfeit N95 masks on April 7th. The shipment of over 170,000 pieces was on its way from China to White Plains in New York State. Houston's CBP port director called the fake safety masks a danger for Americans since these counterfeit N95 respirators may not be effective at filtering airborne particles. He also emphasizes that counterfeit goods hurt the competitiveness of U.S. manufacturers. In the first 3 months of this year alone, CBP seized 18 million counterfeit face masks. In comparison, they seized 12 million in the entire year of 2020. And in 2019, that figure was only 1,300. President Biden is issuing a declaration to speed refugee admissions to the U.S., but the refugee cap will remain constant for 2021. It is the same level set by the Trump administration. The U.S. will admit a total of 15,000 refugees, but the slots are allocated regionally. Almost half are set for Africa. During the presidential campaign, Biden promised to increase the refugee cap to 125,000 yearly. Just last week, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Biden intended to raise the cap to 62,500. The move comes after 40 House Democrats sent a letter this week urging Biden to move quickly on refugee admissions. It also comes as the U.S. sees the largest number of migrant encounters at its southern border in at least 15 years. Could arranging illegal passage into the U.S. be as easy as going on Facebook? A new report suggests it is, and it claims the social media platform helps human smugglers through its handy communication tools. This and more on how the use of social media is driving illegal immigration.
A new report by the Tech Transparency Project reveals the growing method human smugglers are using to advertise their services, Facebook, and in many cases the smugglers are not even trying to disguise themselves. While most pages were transparent about their illegal services, some were categorized as travel companies. The pages are all in Spanish, with the names translated to English. Some of them include Safe Crossing, Trips to the United States, and Cross to USA, and have hundreds or even thousands of followers. The report says the problem is made worse by Facebook's built-in features, like similar page recommendations and prompts for would-be migrants and human traffickers to message each other with ease. Facebook's community standards ban content that offers or assists in smuggling of humans. The report says Facebook continues to leave major holes in its enforcement, providing ample opportunity for human smugglers to exploit the platform's tools. A Facebook spokesperson said in a statement that the company has since removed this content and will continue to do so. Many illegal immigrants making it into the U.S. are touting their success on social media too. This fuels the smuggling through powerful word-of-mouth advertising. Immigration analyst Todd Bensman says along with the Biden administration's policies, these social media posts are what's driving the surge at the border.
Well, I've never met an immigrant who did not have a cell phone that was fully plugged into social media. When people who are further up the trail get in and start sending selfies from the buses and with their papers, that is propelling more of the crisis. That is what's propelling the crisis.
Human smugglers are also posting videos of their successful trips on social media apps like TikTok, like this video showing 2 suspected smugglers transporting their cargo through Texas while armed with a semi-automatic rifle. Benzman said he doesn't think Americans understand the dynamic online network that all prospective migrants are connected to and its powerful effect.
A Black Lives Matter co-founder has bought 4 high-end homes in the U.S., but you won't read about it on Facebook. That's because the social media site has blocked users from sharing the report.
Facebook and Instagram are blocking users from sharing this article by the New York Post. It's about how BLM co-founder Patrisse Khan-Cullors owns multiple homes in predominantly white neighborhoods. Facebook is also censoring a similar report by the Daily Mail. The New York Post article states that Cullors, a self-proclaimed Marxist, has purchased 4 high-end homes for $3.2 million in the U.S. since 2016. According to the report, she has also looked into purchasing a home in the Bahamas at an ultra-exclusive resort where some celebrities have homes. Apartments and townhouses at the beachfront Albany Resort range from $5 million to $20 million. But on Thursday, Facebook users noticed they couldn't share the article on their timeline or through the Messenger app. When a user attempts to share the link, they are blocked from doing so with this message, saying the link goes against Facebook's community standards. This is not the first time social media giants have blocked users from sharing a New York Post article. In October 2020, the infamous Hunter Biden story met the same treatment on Facebook and Twitter. Twitter said it blocked the article because it violated its hacked materials policy and contained phone numbers and emails that violated its private information policy.
Iran says it's enriching its uranium to the country's highest level ever. The announcement comes after Sunday's attack on a nuclear power plant in Iran.
Iran's nuclear chief announced the country is now enriching uranium up to 60% purity. This is the closest Iran has ever gotten to 90%, the amount needed to make a nuclear bomb. A former chief inspector for the International Atomic Energy Agency said in an interview, according to the New York Times, that Iran, in theory, might go from 60% to 90% enrichment in just 1 week. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki called the announcement provocative.
The step both calls into question Iran's seriousness with regard to the nuclear talks and underscores the imperative of returning to mutual compliance.
Iran decided to boost up uranium enrichment after its nuclear facility was attacked on Sunday. The extent of the damage is unknown. Iran blames Israel for the attack. Israel's foreign minister said today that Israel will do whatever it takes to make sure Iran does not acquire nuclear weapons. The attack on Iran's nuclear facility came at the exact time when Iran was meeting with world powers in Vienna. Iran's announcement adds pressure to those talks, which are aimed at restoring its 2015 nuclear deal with world powers. In 2018, President Trump unilaterally withdrew the U.S. from that deal and reimposed sanctions on the nation instead. He accused the Iranian regime of having a secret nuclear weapons program. Iran continues to deny any intention to manufacture nuclear weapons. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And while Iran faces pressure from European sanctions, the country's leaders seem to turn to their Chinese ally. The 25-year deal signed with CCP officials on March 30th might give leverage to the Iranian regime. NTD's David Vives spoke to a French lawmaker who addressed the issue.
Following the Vienna summit, where Iranian leaders announced this Thursday they would continue to enrich their uranium, French lawmakers held an online meeting with Iranian pro-democracy activists. The Iranian dissidents denounced the regime's long-lasting brutality over its people and the nuclear agenda of Iranian leaders. French members of parliament also addressed a new threat: China. The cooperation between Iran and the Chinese Communist Party seems to give leverage to Iran.
There seems to be a long-term cooperation with China. and it never failed, even when Iran was under pressure by the U.S. or Europeans.
On March 30th, the two countries signed a deal which includes $400 to $600 billion in investment from the CCP into Iranian infrastructures in exchange for a steady supply of oil. According to a draft leaked by the New York Times, the deal also includes joint research, weapons development, and intelligence sharing. For MP Gosselin, this issue brings concerns for the US and Europe.
We really need to know what the content of this deal is. $400 to $600 billion over 25 years is not really that much of an investment. But how is this partnership going to unfold during that time? If they want to use it to pursue their nuclear agenda in one way or another, that's our matter of concern.
The deal will also benefit China, which will deepen its influence over the Middle East. China also backed Iran in demanding the US to lift its sanctions. For now, Iran has rejected the Biden administration's proposals to rejoin the 2015 nuclear agreement. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Coming up, the first National World War I Memorial is unveiled in Washington, D.C. It pays tribute to U.S. soldiers and honors their legacy of bravery and sacrifice. And critical race theory is under scrutiny in California after it announced its schools are adopting a new curriculum. One researcher says the theory is divisive and destructive. That and more on NTD News. This morning, a new national memorial was dedicated in Washington, D.C. after years of planning. It honors the nearly 5 million Americans who served in the First World War.
Today, we raised the flag over the memorial for the first time. Let's remember all that was sacrificed, all that was sanctified by a proud, brave Americans who served in World War I.
This is the first National World War I Memorial. It is just a couple of blocks away from the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue.
And what's right gives us as a nation now a fitting memorial in our nation's capital. And we're so proud of all the work that's gone into it.
The memorial debut ceremony this morning included a military fanfare and other music performances, as well as a flyover of two F-22 Raptors. Speakers addressed protecting our future by remembering our history.
I'm happy to see the monument finally being built here in the nation's capital to commemorate or memorialize the sacrifices of the American fighting man in the First World War.
Guests from across the country paid tribute to the 4.7 million American soldiers who fought in the war, honoring a legacy of bravery and sacrifice.
It honors those who took to the stage first to really try to maintain freedom, independence.
This memorial will feature a 65-foot-long sculptural wall called A Soldier's Journey, but it's not ready yet. A canvas stands in its place for now. The bronze wall is set to be unveiled in 2024. The memorial will open to the public Saturday.
Critical race theory is a hot topic in California again since the state announced a new ethnic studies curriculum last month. But those who oppose the ideology say it's divisive and harmful. NTD's Eileen Eng has more.
Editor and filmmaker Christopher Rufo has been focusing his research on critical race theory in K-12 schools for the last 4 months. He saw how the theory manifests as a curriculum, a teacher training program, and what its effects are on kids.
First graders in Cupertino, California, who were forced to deconstruct their racial and sexual identities and then rank themselves according to their power and privilege. Did a story about middle school teachers in Springfield, Missouri, who were forced to locate themselves on an oppression matrix. And white, male, Christian, English-speaking teachers were told that they were inherently oppressors. And other teachers were told that they were inherently oppressed.
He also wrote a piece about teachers in Philadelphia asking fifth graders to celebrate Black communism and simulate an Angela Davis Black Power rally.
These are some of the few examples of the stories about critical race theory in schools that I think illustrate just how nonsensical, how divisive, how destructive and how truly manipulative it can be, especially when applied to very young children.
Rufo says he has seen the theory expand outside of schools. He points out that Portland, Oregon is one of the first cities to adopt the concept, and he suggests it is partially responsible for the unrests last year.
We've seen it as more than 150 days straight of rioting last year after the death of George Floyd, including a group called the Northwest Youth Liberation Front, comprised and led by teenagers who, perhaps in some cases had absorbed some of this ideology in school.
Rufo is concerned that over time, this form of instruction will lead to a deformed education system. Last month, the California State Board of Education approved to implement the Ethnic Studies model curriculum in schools after 4 revisions in 4 years. They say the goal is to help minority students increase graduation and college admission rates. The curriculum will not be mandatory. Rufo says he is working with a coalition of attorneys to file lawsuits, saying critical race theory-based programs violate the Civil Rights Act. They have already filed 3 lawsuits and are planning to file more this summer. Eileen Ng, NTD News, California.
As the weather gets warmer, more people are enjoying the great outdoors again. If you're one of them, then tomorrow could be the perfect day for you. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the story.
Are you looking for something free, healthy, and fun to do tomorrow? Maybe with family and friends? Well, I think you got the perfect idea. National parks across the country are going to waive entry fees tomorrow, and that's because it marks the start of the National Park Week. So if you want to go to, let's say, the Summer White House in Long Island, where President Roosevelt lived until he died, then I think tomorrow might be a good day to do that. All in all, there are 3 national parks across New York State that usually require an entry fee, but won't do so tomorrow. Across the country, there are way more than 3, of course. California alone has 11 national parks that usually require an entry fee. One of those is, of course, the beautiful Yosemite National Park. Now, here in New York City, people can go to Central Park year-round and they never have to pay anything. But let's hear from them if they want to change things up a bit.
I love the park. I love Central Park, but I do wish to travel outside. Yeah, I do miss the parks.
This park does definitely satisfy my needs.
One of the reasons that Central Park is the way it is it's trying to mirror the wilderness park experience like up in the Adirondacks. We have basically every landscape here except for the sublime alpine peaks or the oceans. But everything else we have, meadows, woodlands, mixed picturesque vistas and all that.
So New Yorkers love Central Park, but at the same time they have 1 or 2 ideas for improvement, and also sometimes they just want to get out of the city. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
Coming up, Australia's federal court finds that Google misled consumers about personal location data collected through Android mobile devices. And the San Francisco International Airport teams up with United Airlines to test out biometric scans for passengers on domestic flights. Find out how it works after the short break.
Hey everyone, today's an exciting day. I'm joined by my old friend, Mr. Ellis Williams, aka Mr. Biggs, one of the founding fathers of hip hop from the mighty Soul Sonic Force, who by the way happened to be a CarShield customer, and I had no idea.
When I saw you representing CarShield, I knew CarShield was the real deal. You've always been official.
You called me and you told me, you said, man, I got CarShield and it worked. What made you get it?
I was actually watching a football game at the time. CarShield commercial came on. I was like, you know what? I have this old SUV, and I know the manufacturer warranty is about to run out. I don't want to get stuck with expensive car repairs.
Right.
So I gave CarShield a call. Coverage was very affordable, and there was no long-term contract. A few months after that, transmission went on my car. I took it to my mechanic. Mechanic knew of CarShield. They called CarShield and saved my family and I $2,400.
CarShield is America's #1 auto protection company. Their administrators have paid out over $1 billion in claims and cover most vehicles from 5,000 to 150,000 miles.
When I bought my used car, I didn't expect any problems right away. But when it broke down, I'm glad I had CarShield.
CarShield saved me over $4,000 and followed through with their commitment. Thank you, CarShield.
I've been a CarShield customer for close to 7 years, had 3 vehicles covered, and they saved me close to $9,000.
With coverage through CarShield's administrators, you'll receive 24/7 roadside assistance, courtesy towing, rental reimbursement at no additional charge. Plus, with CarShield's nationwide coverage network, you can choose the mechanic or dealership of your choice no matter where you are.
If you're driving without a warranty, you have to call CarShield.
Yeah, you do. Give CarShield a call today before it's too late. Remember,
CarShield cars go farther.
Protect yourself now against expensive auto repair bills. Call CarShield for a free and instant protection plan quote. Once your car breaks down, it's too late. Call 800-545-5325. That's 800-545-5325.
Gearing up for space travel, NASA and SpaceX are preparing for a launch next week to send 4 astronauts into space. The astronauts arrived at the Kennedy Space Center today.
We come in on the plane over here, and we got to fly by the pad and see our rocket getting ready to go, and it's just an amazing feeling. And I just really want to take every opportunity to say thank you, because we know how much work it takes to get here, and we really appreciate it. And that includes our families, of course, sacrificing along the way.
SpaceX, Elon Musk's company, is ready to send 4 astronauts to the International Space Station. NASA gave them the green light to launch next week. This launch will combine 2 of SpaceX's technologies, a Crew Dragon spacecraft and a Falcon 9 rocket. NASA said the 4 astronauts, known as Crew 2, will go into space for a 6-month science mission. They're replacing 4 other astronauts who are expected to return back to Earth on April 28th. If all safety preparations are completed, we will have liftoff next week. And Australia's federal court finds Google misled consumers about personal location data collected through Android mobile devices. The country's competition regulator announced the news today. Emma McCarthy reports.
Google has come under fire again in Australia, this time for misleading some consumers about personal location data collected through Android mobile devices. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, the ACCC, said it is seeking declarations and penalties from Google, though it did not specify any amount. The case revolves around specific Google settings related to its location data collection, location history, and web and app activity. Australia's federal court found that Google wrongly claimed it could only collect information from the location history setting on user devices between January 2017 and December 2018. ACCC Chair Rod Sims said the ruling is the first of its type in the world in relation to location data issues.
The business therein is to collect as much data from you as possible. Therefore, there's always that incentive to not perhaps be upfront with you in terms of what data they are collecting in case you object to it. This is very pervasive technology, and we just want to make sure that the price you're paying, which is your data, is in fact a price you're comfortable to pay.
A Google spokesman said that while the court had rejected many of the ACCC's claims, the company disagreed with the remaining findings and was reviewing its options, including a possible appeal.
San Francisco Airport wants its travelers to go touch-free. It's testing a way for passengers to scan their faces to board a flight. NTD's Evelyn Lee reports.
United Airlines and San Francisco International Airport are one step closer to a touch-free airport experience. They're the first to try out facial recognition for U.S. domestic flights. SITA, the company behind the technology, says it could make traveling safer because travelers and agents won't have to exchange documents.
Verifies your identity, verifies that you have a boarding pass, and so the agent's able to eliminate the need to take possession of the documents from the traveler.
Passengers participating in the trial link their driver's license to their facial scan at check-in. They can then move through the check-in to backdrop, security, and boarding by simply scanning their face. One regular flyer appreciates the convenience.
Well, I fly a great deal for business, 150,000 miles a year, so I do this pretty regularly, so anything that saves me a little bit of hassle, whether it's this.
Some airports like Athens, Beijing, and Doha already use this technology. The 60-day pilot program in the United States is making it available on roughly 8 flights a day. To address privacy concerns, CETA says that biometric information is stored locally at the airport and is automatically deleted after flights.
They don't share the data, so I think there are going to be people, just like vaccines, that are going to be fearful of it. So I'm not one of those people.
So I think this will be an awesome procedure if it goes through and makes life easy for everybody.
If the trial is successful, CETA says it may expand the technology to other U.S. airports and airlines. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
Coming up, pro-democracy figures are imprisoned in Hong Kong as part of Beijing's continuing crackdown in the city. And new research shows there are 20 million online propagandists working for the Chinese regime. They are, on average, only 19 years old. That and more on NTD News. President Biden met with Japan's Prime Minister at the White House. The two world leaders say they'll work closely to counter mounting threats from the Chinese Communist regime. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more from D.C.
Japanese Prime Minister Suga joined back-to-back meetings today at the White House. He's the first foreign leader to meet in person with Biden and Harris since they took office. This meeting today really shows that it's a top priority for the two world leaders to work on strengthening their partnership, especially when it comes to combating threats from the Chinese Communist Party.
The Japan-U.S. alliance needs to be strong. This is an alliance that is connected by universal values such as freedom, democracy, and the rule of law.
They aim to work together to push back against China's recent aggressive advances in the East, the South China Seas, and the Taiwan Strait.
We committed to working together to take on the challenges from China and on issues like the East China Sea, the South China Sea, as well as North Korea, to ensure a future of a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Right now, Japan hosts over 50,000 U.S. military personnel, and they're likely to act if China tries to invade Taiwan.
We agreed to oppose any attempts to change the status quo by force or coercion in the East and South China Seas and intimidation of others in the region. At the same time, we agreed on the necessity for each of us to engage in frank dialogue with China and, in so doing, to pursue stability of international relations while upholding universal values.
Biden and Suga are also condemning the CCP's human rights abuses in Hong Kong and Xinjiang.
And we're committed to defending and advancing our shared values, including human rights and the rule of law.
5G is a top priority too. Japan is committing $2 billion to work with the U.S. to develop 5G alternatives to lessen China's Huawei dominance.
That includes making sure we invest in and protect the technologies that will maintain and sharpen our competitive edge. And those technologies are governed by shared democratic norms that we both share. Norms set by democracies, not by autocracies.
The U.S. and Japan will also work to diversify supply chains to reduce dependence on China. Their plans to strengthen the U.S.-Japan alliance were met with threats from the CCP just ahead of today's meeting.
Avoid words and actions that interfere with China's internal affairs and harm China's interests, and refrain from engaging in forming cliques against China. China will make necessary responses as appropriate.
An advisor to Prime Minister Suga described today's meeting with Biden as a precursor to a series of meetings with like-minded countries to send the right message to Beijing. Another topic of conversation today was how the U.S. and Japan will work on aligning their strategies when it comes to how to handle North Korea and their nuclear missiles programs. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Biden will host South Korean President Moon Jae-in in Washington within the next month. He's another important U.S. ally in the Indo-Pacific region. They'll likely prioritize talks on North Korea. And Hong Kong is sending some of the most influential pro-democracy figures to prison. The city that was once semi-autonomous is now facing Beijing's crackdown. NTD's Penny Zhou has the latest.
Some of Hong Kong's most prominent pro-democracy figures are going to prison. On Friday, the city's father of democracy, Martin Lee, was sentenced to a suspended 11 months in jail. 7 former opposition lawmakers will also be jailed from 8 to 18 months. The reason for their imprisonment? They participated in 2 pro-democracy protests in 2019. Defense lawyers argued that the assemblies in question are peaceful and their clients have long been against violence. The heaviest sentence went to activist and former lawmaker Lee Chak-yan, who will spend 18 months behind bars. He thanked supporters before going into the court.
No matter whether we are in jail or outside, we work together. So I want to thank you, all the people of Hong Kong, for the comradeship, the feeling of solidarity together. And with this feeling of solidarity, we can win.
Hong Kong's media tycoon Jimmy Lai, who is already in detention, was sentenced to a year in prison. The 73-year-old founder of Apple Daily is a fierce critic of Beijing and previously said he would not escape Hong Kong.
I cannot do that. You know, if I leave, not only I disgrace myself, I discredit Apple Daily and also undermine the solidarity of the democratic movement. It's something I have to take responsibility.
73-year-old Margaret Ng was also sentenced. She served as an opposition lawmaker for 18 years. The Hong Kong court argued that the sentence terms will prevent similar protests from happening. The sentencing drew immense media and public attention. Envoys from the United States, European Union, Germany, Canada, France, Netherlands, and Sweden attended the hearing.
I mean, we're following this because, as I say, it involves pro-democracy figures and also it involves a peaceful protest. So clearly, this is of interest, legitimate interest to the international community, and that's why we're here today.
The sentencing came after Beijing implemented a law in Hong Kong that criminalizes criticism against Chinese and Hong Kong authorities. Earlier this month, Beijing changed the city's electoral rules to ensure only those loyal to Beijing can be in power. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Hong Kong authorities are lashing out at an anti-Beijing newspaper. They've already sentenced its founder, Jimmy Lai, to prison. A local pro-Beijing newspaper says that the regime should shut down Lai's paper completely. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
After sentencing Hong Kong lawmakers, the regime's next target seems to be local pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily. On Thursday, Hong Kong Police Chief Chris Tang said that Apple Daily continues to produce misleading reports, adding that its goal is to incite hatred and divide public opinion in Hong Kong. But Hong Kong's Journalists Association said Tang's remarks are baseless. Lots of evidence has surfaced showing police have violently attacked reporters on the street. The organization advised Tang to take back the remarks. Tang isn't the only one taking shots at pro-democracy media. A local official also joined in recently. John Lee serves as head of Hong Kong's security department. He said the city's human rights activists use the media to spread destructive thoughts. He also accused the activists of endangering national security. The remarks coincide with an editorial published by a local pro-Beijing newspaper. On Friday, Da Gongbao newspaper suggested that Apple Daily should be shut down to close a security loophole. The article accused the pro-democracy publication of colluding with foreign forces, inciting violence, and publishing fake news. Apple Daily's founder Jimmy Lai responded to the attacks. The 73-year-old's handwritten letter reads, "Let's stand tall in fallen times." He said journalists should seek justice, and as long as their minds are righteous, they are fulfilling their responsibility. Lai has been held in custody since late last year. He wrote the letter while in jail. In it, he thanked colleagues for their love and support. Lai was sentenced to an additional 12 months in prison on Friday. The CCP's public opinion war involves a lot more participants than you may have imagined. In addition to the 50-cent army, 20 million so-called volunteers have also joined the fight. Their average age is just 19. The 50-cent army refers to internet commentators hired by Chinese authorities. Their job is to manipulate public opinions online. Their name comes from their alleged pay of 50 cents per post. Earlier this week, Georgetown University researcher Ryan Fedusiak published his study about China's internet trolls at a Washington-based think tank. Fedusiak says according to research data, most of the so-called online volunteers are college students. Their task is to, as they call it, purify the cyberspace. The report says these volunteers need to like, forward, and comment on Chinese social media to support the CCP's narratives and policies. They also need to attack, censor, or ban anyone criticizing the regime. Their official name is Online Propagandists. As early as 2014, a notice from the Central Office of the Communist Youth League demanded that colleges vigorously build a team of online propagandists. A list attached to the notice shows the number of online propagandists at different Chinese universities. The top school on the list has 1,200 of them. Fedusiak also points out many of these college students are not necessarily volunteers. Some of them may want to work in government agencies or state-run companies after graduation. Experiences as an online propagandist can make their resumes look better. Fedusiak reminds the international community about the CCP's recent boycott of international brands. He says this is just the first step of the CCP's public opinion war.
Coming up, more details are revealed about Prince Philip's funeral on Saturday. It will look a little different because of the pandemic, but the palace says it will still be in line with the late royal's wishes. And the super wealthy bought more homes in London than any other city in the world during the pandemic. That and more on NTD News.
During the 2008 recession, Americans lost over $2 trillion from their 401ks. For many people, retirement was no longer an option. But do you know what tried and true investment nearly doubled its value following the recession? Gold. Protect your money. Buy gold. For your free direct bullion guide to buying gold, call 1-800-757-7050. Start your collection today. We can't control political volatility, inflation, massive government debt, or the wild swings of the stock market. But we can control where we put our money. Gold is easily outperforming the stock market the last 20 years. Protect your money. Buy gold. For your free direct bullion guide to buying gold, call 1-800-757-7050.
Now we know more details for the funeral on Saturday of the late Prince Philip. The palace says that despite the adjustments due to the pandemic, the arrangements are very much in line with the Duke of Edinburgh's wishes. NTD's Neil Woodrow brings us more.
The Duke of Edinburgh's ceremonial royal funeral will take place here in Windsor on Saturday inside the grounds of the castle. At 11 a.m, a bearer party from the Queen's Company, the 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards, will carry Prince Philip's coffin from the private chapel to the inner hall of the castle. The coffin will be covered by the Prince's standard, a wreath, his naval cap and sword. Only 30 mask-wearing mourners are permitted because of COVID-19 rules. These will include the Queen and all senior royals, including the Duke's children and grandchildren. At 2 p.m, the ceremonial aspect begins. In recent days, various military personnel have been preparing and rehearsing in readiness. Military detachments will line up in the castle's quadrangle. They are drawn from Prince Philip's special military relationships and include the Royal Navy, the Royal Marines, the Grenadier Guards, the Royal Gurkha Rifles, the Intelligence Corps and the Highlanders. Then a modified Land Rover that Prince Philip helped design will enter the quadrangle. Buckingham Palace said the Prince started on the project with the Land Rover 18 years ago, with the hearse based on a Defender TD130 chassis and then modified, with the open-top rear section custom-made to the Duke's specification. All those in the quadrangle will give the coffin a royal salute before it is placed onto the Land Rover. The Queen will then depart from the Sovereign's entrance in the State Bentley. The procession will move towards St George's Chapel, through Engine Court, Chapel Hill Parade Ground and into Horseshoe Cloister, arriving at the West Steps. The royals who will follow on foot behind the coffin are Prince Philip's 4 children, Princess Charles, Andrew, Edward and Princess Anne, along with grandsons William and Harry. The minute guns will be fired by the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery from the east lawn of Windsor Castle throughout the duration of the procession, and the curfew tower bell behind me will also toll. The national anthem will play as the coffin arrives at Horseshoe Cloister, to be met by representatives from the Commonwealth and a dismounted detachment of the Household Cavalry. The Queen's Bentley will stop outside the Galilee porch, where she will be met by the Dean of Windsor, David Connor. The coffin will pause for the National Minute of Silence at 3 p.m. A gun fired from the east lawn will signify the start and end. During the service, a small choir of 4 will sing pieces of music chosen by the Duke. Prince Philip's insignia will be positioned on 9 cushions on the altar. These are the medals and decorations conferred on him.
Insignia, orders, decorations, medals are a way that a country has of saying thank you and recognising somebody's achievements. The Duke of Edinburgh had, I think, 61 decorations and awards from 53 different other countries, and there simply just wasn't the space to have them all on display at the funeral.
At the conclusion of the service, the Duke of Edinburgh's coffin will be lowered into the royal vault. The Archbishop of Canterbury will pronounce the blessing, and the national anthem will be sung by the choir. Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, had been by the Queen's side throughout her 69-year reign. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, Windsor Castle.
Despite the pandemic and lockdowns, figures suggest that the super wealthy bought more homes in London than any other city in the world. Transactions increased in the capital, while sales in the usual top markets of Hong Kong and New York went down. Here's NTD's Jane Werrell in London with more.
The £10 million plus property market proved resilient in London despite restrictions and a pandemic. The ultra-wealthy were enticed to buy while prices were lower than usual.
During lockdown and very strict lockdowns, the inquiry levels were still quite strong. This was a great time to purchase a property in Prime Central where they've been looking for the last year or so. This is the time they act, rather than when the market's booming and prices going up.
Research from the estate agency Knight Frank found UK-based buyers made up a third of all super prime buyers in London, increasing from 12% in 2019, probably partly driven by the fact that the housing market kept running here during the recent lockdowns. The super wealthy bought a total of 201 super prime homes in the capital, collectively worth more than £2.7 billion. Transactions for super prime homes in London rose by 3%, while sales in Hong Kong fell by 27% and sales in New York fell by 48%. During the first quarter of this year, figures from London estate agency Benham & Reeves shows a 2% increase in demand for homes costing more than £10 million.
The interesting thing is on domestic buyers buying those properties. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they are British born and raised. That just means they might have a British passport and live here at the moment or are staying here at the moment, and they've deployed their capital to buy an expensive super prime property. And the thing that's interesting for those buyers is that they've been here. There haven't been the travel restrictions. So they've been here and they've been able to go around and look at what's in the market. And actually, they've done very well because they've had the strength of their currency against sterling, especially the dollar, and it's enabled them to buy well in this market and had good choice with not a lot of competition.
The data shows that for the super wealthy, it's time to invest. Reports say that the property tycoon Nick Candy is putting his £170 million penthouse in Knightsbridge on the market. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
Coming up, find out how a group of farmers are using classical music to grow some of the world's most expensive melons. Stay tuned to find out more. Japanese muskmelons are one of the world's most expensive fruits, but a team of Malaysian farmers found a way to grow them successfully in their home country, and classical music played a part.
For the past 10 years, 3 farmers have been perfecting the right mix of nutrients and treatments to successfully grow Japanese muskmelons. They're one of the world's most expensive fruits. After constant experimentation, the farmers at Mano Farm are finally selling their prized luxury fruits of labor on the Malaysian market.
Every single Japanese melon that you see in our farm is almost like a single art piece. This is one of the most important criteria and most difficult to maintain it. To make sure they have very nice appearance and acting, we have to make sure the nutrition, the watering and the fertilizer have to be very consistent and very precisely.
Se and his colleagues also perform regular massages with a soft cloth or glove, which is said to enhance the flavor. They also play classical music for the plants via speakers in the greenhouses, which they believe stimulates their growth. Growing muskmelons in the tropics was a challenge for Se and his team. The fruit prefers a temperate climate. But the Mano Farms team learned the cultivation process through several trips to Japanese farms, plus trial and error.
We are facing a lot of challenge, like very hot weathers, the composition of the nutrition, the technical know-how on how to grow this Japanese melon. Until recently, we find a right variety, right nutrients, right where to grow it.
For their first official harvest, Mano sold around 200 of the 400 muskmelons they grew. They sell for around $40 each, which is about a third of the price muskmelons imported from Japan usually sell for.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.